The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 3, Aenir, Chapter 4. As Tal and Mila fell, the Stormshepherds dived after them. Swooping down, they grabbed their new companions and shot back out of the crevice. Just as they cleared the rim, the giant crack snapped shut, spraying earth, stones, and mud into the sky.
"Free!"
boomed Adris as he rose up into the sky, Tal dangling from one puffy hand.
"Free!"
"Free!" sang Audris. "Free at last of the hateful hill." "Well, not exactly," shouted Tal. "You are spirit shadows after all, or you will be when we get back to the castle." He wasn't sure what the procedure was now. If he'd bound Adris to him in the usual way, the Storm Shepherd would be a servant and would have to do what he was told. But he was a free companion. Somehow, Tal thought, every time he got himself out of trouble, he created a whole lot more for himself as well. Nothing was ever simple. Thinking of trouble made Tal look across at Mila. She was hanging limply in Audris's grip, clearly still dazed by the blow to her head.
"And you are my chosen,"
answered Adris, which made Tal frown.
"Where do we travel, Tal?"
"Down, for a start," said Tal, suppressing a shiver. They'd gone up a long way very quickly, and it was cold. Old Riga Hill was far below them with the new lake surrounding it. He could see the forest, the one where the trees had walked away. They had stopped on higher ground, quite a long way south. The sun was almost down now. It had settled behind the line of hills to the west. The stars were quite clear above the hills, gleaming in the constellations of Aenir, many of them familiar to Tal from his early childhood. His family had always spent their first night in Aenir after the day of Ascension, looking at the stars. There was the many-starred cluster called the Jewel Box, and the triangular formation known as the Dragon Head, though Tal didn't think it really looked like one. They reminded him of his family, so far away, beyond his grasp. It was easy to keep staring at the stars, but that would not help his mission. Tal looked away. He had to think of what to do next. He had to forget about his lost spirit shadow and focus on finding the Codex. The Codex would help him find Graf. Graf was the first step toward reuniting his family. One step at a time. "Adris has not left the bounds since the forgetting, and I have been bound all my life," said Audris, gliding closer and interrupting Tal's thoughts. "It is strange to do more than look upon distant lands. Where shall we alight?" Tal peered down. There was the lake, the forest, and wide patches of bare grassland. He could see a ring of standing stones, but that was probably best avoided, for strong magic and stronger creatures made such places their home. There were also some low hills, but Tal didn't like the look of them after his experience with Old Riga. That was the trouble with Aenir, he thought. You could never tell when a hill was just a hill. "How about there?" he asked, pointing to an area of burnt-out grassland. It looked like a fire had raced through within the last few days. Hopefully this meant that the earth was just earth, and anything else that might have lurked there would have fled the fire. The Storm Shepherds began to drop down. Tal noticed that Adris got quite a lot colder as they fell, and that he kept looking across at Audris and adjusting his rate of fall to match her speed. Tal sighed. It was already clear that Adris, who would be his spirit shadow back in the castle, was not the smartest of Storm Shepherds. Big and powerful, but a bit of a dimmer when it came to brain power. It was worse than he feared. A smart spirit shadow was of enormous help to an ambitious chosen. A stupid one was quite the reverse. "Mila, are you all right?" Tal called out as Adris dropped him the last few stretches down on the blackened earth. The fire had been recent, because he could still smell it. The odor of burnt grass was very strong. Audris hovered even lower than Adris and gently lay Mila down. The Icecarl didn't move. Tal hurried over. Mila must have hit her head harder than he'd thought. He knelt down beside her and mentally ran over the healing spells he could cast with his sunstone. But if she had a really serious head injury, there was nothing... Suddenly he found himself on his back, with Mila's knee in his chest and her bone knife at his throat. She leaned close, her eyes wild and her mouth set in an animal snarl. "Traitor!" she shouted, and dug the point of her knife into his neck, hard enough to draw a thin trickle of blood. "You sold my shadow!" "But we had to," Tal tried to say. Mila was really going to kill him this time, he suddenly knew. The knife hurt, and she would need to slide it in only a little bit more. "I should kill you," hissed Mila. "Shadow stealer!" She returned the knife to her sleeve. Tal sighed in relief. But his sigh was cut off as Mila suddenly pushed her thumbs against 2 nerves on his neck. She pushed quickly 3 times. On the third push, Tal's eyes closed, and his head fell back. Mila stood up. The 2 Stormshepherds looked at her.
"I suppose I should defend my companion,"
said Adris, looking down at Tal's unconscious form.
"I felt that too, you know."
"But then you would have to fight me, brother," said Adris. Adris shrugged.
"He seems to be unhurt."
"Give me back my shadow!" Mila screamed. She drew her Merwin hornsword and cut at Adris, but the sword just went straight through the cloud flesh. The bright Merwin horn could cut shadow, but here in Einir, Adris was not a shadow. "I can't," said Adris plaintively. "We are tied together now until the end of our days. I will go with you to your—" "No, no, no!" screamed Mila, hacking away at the Stormshepherd. But her furious blows only exhausted her. Adris bore them without flinching. Adris merely watched Tal, crouching at his side like a huge statue carved from fog. Finally, Mila stood back and took several very slow breaths. She was using a Rovkir exercise to prevent the onset of berserk fury. "You'll get used to it," said Adris. "No, I won't," said Mila. "I will give myself to the ice." "There isn't much ice on Einir," said Adris. "There might not be any. It's a hot place on the whole." "I will return to the Dark World," Mila stated coldly. "I will find the chosen enclave and force one of them to show me how to cross back. Then I will give myself to the ice." "Why?" asked Adris. Mila stood staring into space for a moment. Then she whispered, "I cannot be an Icecarl without my shadow. I cannot be a shield maiden without my shadow. I am no one without my shadow." "But I'll be your shadow when we—" Adris started to say. Before the Storm Shepherd could continue, Mila turned and ran out into the star-flecked darkness. Adris sighed, a big sigh that swept up a cloud of charcoal dust that blew over Adris. He growled and puffed himself up a few times to shake it off. "I have to go after her," said Adris. She sounded a bit surprised. "It feels very odd to be bound to a person rather than to a place."
"It does, doesn't it?"
agreed Adris.
"I hope mine wakes up soon."
"I will try to bring mine back," said Adris. "Make sure you tell the wind where you are, Adris, so I can find you. And don't go across to the Dark World without me."
"I won't,"
replied Adris.
"I mean, I will tell the wind, and I won't cross."
The 2 Storm Shepherds slowly billowed their arms out to touch palms. Then Adris leapt up into the sky. She drew the wind around her and set off after Mila. Adris sat back down and looked at Tal. Somehow he could feel that the boy was all right. He was only sleeping now. It was odd being bound to a person, Adris thought, as his own breathing matched Tal's, and he felt his lightning-charged eyes begin to close. Storm Shepherds rarely slept, but he felt like it now. As his eyes closed, his body lost its form, arms and legs spreading till they joined. the dark, threatening cloud in his middle smoothed into fluffy white. Within minutes, Adris became a circular mass of low cloud, hovering above the sleeping Tal. Out in the darkness, 3 creatures looked upon the sleeping boy and considered what he might be like to eat. Tongues flicked in and out, sampling the air. There was a bitter tang to it, something to do with the cloud, something that hinted of danger. The creatures hesitated. Perhaps the sleeping chosen was not the easy prey they sought. They touched tongues, exchanging information. Together, they would decide whether to attack or not.